Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over the spray guns I will be using to spray the Durango Hellcat Striker Green. So while I was at SEMA, I met up with Anest Iwata, and I have been using their guns for a very long time. So they ended up sending me a new set of paint guns, cups, everything that I need to spray the Durango Hellcat. So I'll be going over each gun and what it's for. So I ended up getting a W400, an LPH 400, and an LS 400, and cups for each one of those guns. They also sent me a nice regulator, and they sent me a needle set. I'm going to start off with a gun that I use all the time. This is my high build primer gun. It's an Anest Iwata AZ3 with a 2.0 tip. It lays down primer really well and really thick. Why I use this is because it has a 2.0 tip. Most primer guns have a 1.8, which Anest Iwata, they sent me 3 other guns. One of those was a sealer / primer gun, which they sent me a 1.8 tip to use in that gun, but I'm going to only use it specifically just for sealer. So I have one for primer, one for sealer, one for base, one for clear. Then I don't have to be swapping needles or flip-flopping, etc. So when I first start off cleaning a gun, I pretty much want to, your cup is going to be full of primer, base, clear, whatever it is, it's going to be full of it. I want to clean the lid first. And you're going to have a stand. I don't have a stand right now. But you're going to come in here, you want to come in, clean the lid, put a little bit of fluid in there, and then you're going to brush around the edge a little bit. I'm just going to come in here, just spray this down, get your brush. You want to brush around the edge. You pretty much just do this pretty quick because it doesn't need to be perfect. The solvent will clean up most of it. You want to just brush around, the top right there. I'm actually getting some crud off that's been there for a little bit. And just kind of go like that. It doesn't really have to be perfect because this will clean it all up. Then you go like that. Dump that solvent in your cup. So after you're done, you have a nice clean rag. You just want to come in here, wipe everything down, wipe the top down, get it nice and decently clean. You'll never get them 100% clean unless you have one of those cleaning machines, and most of the time those don't even do that. Just set that right there. Next thing, you're gonna want to come in and clean this cup, which is gonna have, it's gonna have a fine layer of paint or whatever. I just pretty much go around the edge of it and get as much as I can possibly off of there, like that. Then you could swirl that solvent. That's in there around to get the rest of the paint. And then what you're going to effectively do is have all that down here, and then you're just going to squirt it in here, and it'll be, be whatever color the paint or primer is, and just go a couple times like that. Then you just want to hit that hole that's in the center of there, and you just want to kind of flush out the rest of that paint that's on the edge. Go one more time, get most of the solvent out of there. You really don't have to get it all. Then you're going to pull the cup off of there, which when you pull the cup, since this doesn't have paint in it, there isn't any coating on there because I usually clean them, but there would be primer or base or clear back here. And what you would want to do is just, hit that with a little bit of solvent and just brush it off, and then, hit it with a little bit more solvent, and then you're good to go. Just wipe it out with a rag, clean all the rest of the primer and etc. base or clear out of it. Get the tip, you can get the outside. If it's a clear gun, it's going to be a lot worse because clear just is a fog and it builds up. So now you have a clean cup. You're going to just screw it on the lid, set it to the side, and then you're going to move on to your gun, which I usually pull this cap off next, but I just stop at that cap. So pull that cap off. You're going to want to usually pop that out because sometimes, stuff builds up. Come in here, do this, brush it. You want to get all the edges and the surfaces and etc. just so you don't have any buildup, because the more buildup you have, the worse it gets, because then you get contamination and stuff. So it's usually pretty easy when you clean your gun all the time. And then they have pipe brushes for these little holes, but usually if you just come in and you put your tip in there and then you blast it, it doesn't really let it build up as long as you're cleaning the gun right away and you're not trying to, you're not letting it sit for a very long time. Then you can put this into your solvent, which I don't really have much solvent in there because I'm not actually cleaning a gun. And then you just want to come in here, do the same thing, give it a little scrub. You know, I'm just kind of going quick because it's not dirty, but you go like that, come in here, get the threads, blast it off a little bit more, set it in there. The next thing you're going to want to do, you never are really going to mess with this upper fan pattern, because unless you're adjusting the fan, because you don't need to take that out to clean anything, you're going to want to pull this out before you try to take this off. And this isn't as important when you're taking it apart, but when you're putting it back together, if you put this needle in and thread this all the way down, when you try to tighten this, the needle won't have anywhere to go because this will be all the way in, because this doesn't have a stop. And then you'll damage the tip, damage the needle. You'll have to get a new tip and you'll have to get a new needle. So what you want to do, what I always do, is pull this out first. Pull the spring out. Most of the time, this doesn't get dirty unless it's a clear gun, because clear just fogs out. So if it's a clear gun, I usually, you know, just kind of rinse it off, give it a little brush, and then, you know, wipe it off, throw it in the solvent, just so it can kind of break down that clear. Primer guns, you could do the same thing, it really doesn't matter. So then you pull the needle out. The needle usually is pretty clean. I just come in and just give it a wipe, and that's about it, because you don't need to go really too crazy with it. Set the needle in here, and you don't want to damage the needle, so don't drop the needle, don't, you know, scuff the, you know, like get the needle scuffed up, because if it gets damaged, you'll need to get a new needle, etc., because it won't seal right. Then you come in here with this tool, and you'll have a bunch of these tools. Each paint gun usually comes with one. Come in here, break it loose. So like that. And then this, you could get a set of pipe cleaners, but same thing. If you clean this all the time, it really doesn't have buildup. On the outside, you can brush it like this. And then most of the time, I just come in here like this and just blast it out, put the thing in the tip, give it a nice hose down, throw it in there, ready to go. The most cleaning you're gonna have to do is in here, because these threads will build up a bunch of whatever color, base, clear, primer, and then in here. So as long as you clean the gun all the time, you don't have to really worry about it. Most of the time, if you clean it fast enough, you don't have to brush it. You could just, you know, you can kind of just hit it like this, around, blast it down, and then flip it over, and then get the top. Same thing. So get the top, get in there. You want to get all the way in there. If you have a pipe brush, you know, you could just swab it a few times, swab it this way a few times, and then re-blast it, and then you're good to go. So now, assembling the gun back together, and also you could, you know, I usually do this last. You can wipe the gun down at this point, but I usually do that last. You're gonna wanna start off first doing when you're assembling the gun. Like I said before, you want this in first, because if you don't have this in first, and you try to put this in after the needle is in, you're gonna damage the needle and damage this tip, and then you're gonna have to get a new one, because the gun's gonna leak, it's not gonna spray right, it's gonna spray weird, and you're gonna be like, what's going on with my gun, etc. So come in here, and you're not trying to torque this thing down to like 100 foot-pounds, you just kind of give it a little tiny tap, and then you're good to go. And at this point, since I'm putting the gun back together, I usually stick the tip on it. You just go like this, thread the tip on. Don't want to cross thread this, don't, you know, take your time. There we go, we got the tip on there. Now is the point where you put your needle in, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about damaging the needle and the spring. So this is your flow. I usually just come in here with it, and every time it gives you a very good starting point. You just go in, start the threads, and I'm not exactly sure how many times I spin it. I guess you can watch in the video, but I usually just give it like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's a very good starting point to check your spray pattern on a piece of paper. For your fan pattern, usually you can back this out all the way. You just back it all the way out and it'll stop like that. And they all have numbers on them, or this one has a little tick on it, and you can see it's almost at 2. So I usually go on the fan pattern, you know, we go 2 in, and that is a good starting point. depending on what you're spraying, you know, if it's really something tight, you want to go all the way in and kind of go, you know, adjust these, make sure you don't have too much fluid flow, you don't have, you know, too fine of a point, too much fluid flow, or, you know, too big of a pattern and not enough fluid flow, etc. So now this gun is ready to go clean. I put the cup on it, and before I go and be done with it, I do a last little bit of solvent in there, and then you just kind of go, and you can see that, you know, it's obviously going to be clear, but you'd be able to see if it has any contamination, and then you can leave a little bit in there just so you make sure that if there is any clear, most of the time on clear guns, or I have a bunch of other guns for gel coating, etc., if you leave a little bit of solvent in there, you know that the tip isn't going to get bound up or stuck. It's just a really good safety thing. So now, like I said before, I usually don't wipe my guns down at that one stage. I wipe them down now, and the reason is you can grab the cup, and then you could pretty much just hose the gun down, or you could hose like a towel down, and then you could just wipe it down, like so. And then you want to also wipe behind this handle, because crud builds up in there, and it can get in your paint. Primer really doesn't matter, but sealer, base, clear, etc. And the reason why I wipe it down by holding the cup is because most of the time your hands have, like, especially with clear, they have like this sticky stuff on it. So then if you touch a stainless, or I guess this is polished aluminum, whatever it is, it leaves imprints, and then you're like, oh, well, I just cleaned my gun, but it looks like crap. So this is that gun, the primer gun 2.0. Put links in the description for this and all the other ones. And now we'll go on to the next gun, which is the gun I'm going to use for specifically sealer only, and that is this right here. It's a W400 LV, and I'm very happy to have a specific sealer gun now, because this is just going to be super awesome. This gun is a red tip. It's a 1.3 tip. And this works very, very well for sealer. So same thing goes, cleaning it is exactly how I clean the primer gun. Every paint gun is going to be, well, I guess not, I'm not sure if every paint gun is going to be the same, but every paint gun I've ever used is going to be the same. You know, you have your fan pattern, your flow, and you just adjust them, test them on paper, and you just kind of go exactly where you want it to be. And I'll show you a good fan pattern, etc. You just kind of want it to be nice and tight, kind of like a, I don't know, an eye of a cat or an ellipse. So this gun is really, really nice because, like I said, it's a 1.3 tip. They also sent me the 1.8 tip if I wanted to use it as a primer gun, which I'm not going to. So I'm gonna just put this in the box. And then they sent a cup for each gun. So these cups are really nice, and it's really nice to have a specific cup for each gun. You just go like this, a nice clean cup, don't have to worry about anything else, and we have like wham, bam. Look at that, ready to go. So this is the Anest Iwata LPH 400 LBS, and this is also a 1.3 tip, but this is the workhorse for mostly base. A lot of people use it for base, and that's also what I'm going to be using it for. So it has an orange tip right here. And the same thing, it's going to adjust fan up here, fluid flow down here, and we have a nice cup. The cup, you know, just threads on like the other one. And this is going to be a very good gun for base, but when you're spraying it around like 25 psi, and then when you're doing your drop coat around like 18 psi. So I can't wait to actually use this thing on the Durango. It's supposed to be very, very well for base, and a lot of people do use this gun. But like I said, each one of these kits comes with some spray gun lubricant for the needle, a tool, and also a brush. And then it also has this little filter, but I don't know anybody that uses those things. So as long as you filter your paint before it goes in the gun. Gun cleaning is going to be the exact same. As you can see, nozzle, you remove it, same thing right there. So each one of them is going to have a different tip, a different feature, different things to clean on the inside of this nozzle and also on the back side of this nozzle. As you can see, there's all these little holes in this one, which you want to make sure to hold those up to like a light and make sure you don't have any buildup in there. Clean that if you do. So let's move on to the clear gun, which is really, really exciting. The last gun is the clear gun, and this is the WS 400 Supernova with the HD tip. So we have all the stuff is at the top, a few pieces of paper that tell you how to use the gun, and then we have the gun right here. So this looks a little bit different than the other ones. As you can see, it's a little bit shinier. These tips right here are a little bit different, but it's the same concept. We have fan pattern, fluid flow, the tip right here, and this thing is going to actually be really, really good for clear. So it still has a 1.3 tip, but you're going to run this at 26 psi, and you're going to just want to set your fan pattern up the same way as you'd set up anything. So you want to have a nice, decent sized fan pattern, but you want it to be like an ellipse and be really, really tight. You're going to just fan that in, and as you spray it, you know, a lot of people spray like this, which is you have your middle finger right here, but as you can see on all the bottom of these, they have the airflow to set the airflow, and you could hear it as you set it, but we don't have it connected to the air. But as you're spraying this, you want to wrap your finger around there, and over time you're going to mess with your airflow, which is not a good thing. So you want to hold your gun up here, is how I do it. You have your pinky here, and then you can either have one finger, I usually have two, then you have your other finger up here just kind of supporting it, and as you come across, you don't have to worry about your finger being down here messing with the air, which is a very common problem. So as you can see, these guns come with this other tip, which I do not have that, but we have the other cup, which is right here. And this screws right in there. Like so. Now we have this clear gun, and it's going to work very, very well, as you guys will see in the next couple videos, because or multiple videos, because I'm going to be spraying everything on the Durango a different color, changing the color. The same thing applies when you're cleaning this. Just make sure, since it is a clear gun, you're going to want to very thoroughly clean all of the back surfaces here, all the way around these knobs. Everything will build up, especially on this bottom knob, this ledge. There will always be clear buildup. These little ridges right here, you'll have clear buildup. And then on these, because it's such a fine mist that it's putting out, you want to make sure to clean all of these holes right here. And then in here, you probably can't see it, but on that brass fitting, there are 4 little holes that you want to make sure are always cleaned out. And the same thing with those right here. You want to make sure all that's cleaned out. So just thoroughly clean the gun. It really helps when you're spraying it, because if you have any weird issues, or if you have something where your tip is bad and it's actually dripping, that's not good, because if you have drips on your clear, it's a pain, because you have to sand it out, or then you have to repaint it. So let's move on to the next thing, which is the regulators. So they sent me a few regulators. They have sent me this regulator right here. They also sent me this regulator setup right here. Pretty straightforward. The one thing that sucks about regulators is as you build stuff up off the bottom of the gun, as you can see right here, you have the regulator down here. The gun is getting longer and longer. Then you have your hose end, or if you have another additional filter, which I usually have down here, then you have your hose end, then you have your hose, nothing swivels. Then it's very, very difficult if you're trying to spray up to get a rocker. This is as high as a rocker is going to be. You have like a foot right there. So what I like to do is pull this off, and I like to have a swivel down here as close to the bottom of the gun as I can, because if there's a swivel, then you could have your gun closer to the ground, which gives you a little bit better area and a little bit more room to work with, because you can't turn your gun upside down or to the side because the paint will leak out of the top, which then it gets all over your gun. It's a pain to clean. Then they start to look like, you know, if you don't clean them right, then they start to look really, really awful. So let's grab that swivel and throw it on the end. As you can see, I have a swivel right here. And one thing you want to make sure is, after a while, there's O-rings in here and they'll start to leak. You don't want those to leak because you'll have contamination issues. So just have your swivel right here. Put it on the end of your gun. So now you have the swivel. So the lowest part of your gun is that tall. So that's a lot better than even, you know, this. Then you have, here, let me show you exactly what I'm talking about with everything attached to it. Did this with two guns. I did it with the clear gun, with the swivel, as you can see. Then I did it with this gun with, it still doesn't have the airline or the chuck in it, but just to show you the difference between having a swivel and not having a swivel, look at that. That's a pretty big difference. So I would definitely recommend doing it with the swivel directly on the gun, because it's a lot easier to move your hose around, as well as, you know, throw it over your shoulder when you're trying to get the roof. But when you're trying to spray up towards the rocker, look at the difference. I mean, that's, I don't know, maybe 6 inches or so. So we'll look at that. Not too bad. So I would definitely recommend doing that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw some solvent in a gun, mess with the fan pattern, mess with the fluid flow, and just kind of show you what the different settings are. So it won't be paint, but it will be, you know, you'll be able to see it against the masking paper. So let's set that up. So when you're setting your air pressure, you want to have this turned all the way in. You want to have this as out as it needs to be. So as you can see, I'm in, no air is coming out of it. And you start to turn this until you don't hear the sound change. Right there. And then you adjust this back. You want to have like 26 PSI right there. We're good to go. So you have that first stop and it's not letting any fluid out. So you go 1, 2, 1, 2. So we have our fan all the way out, we have our fluid flow all the way out, and as you can see over here, we're going to just hit this, and it's just, all it is solvent. See, it's really light, no fluid flow, really large fan. So we're going to turn this all the way in, still all the way out on our, almost all the way in. So if you go all the way in, it's just going to be, look at that. Huge, lot of fluid flow, even though this is still all the way out, or fluid flow all the way out, you still have a lot of material coming out. This is solvent, so it's a lot thinner, so a lot more is going to come out, but it gives you a very good idea. As you adjust, we're leaving this the same. We'll go 1 turn out. See, a little bit nicer. Another turnout. So as you go out on your fan pattern, it's going to go larger. So how I usually set this up is I go all the way out like this. It might not work because it's solvent. You can see the tick is on the bottom. We're going to go 1, 2. Let's do a half. And then you're going to come in and you can see how nice that is right there with minimal fluid flow. And our fluid flow a little bit. We'll go up. It's about 2.5 turns in. So clear, it's going to be a lot finer of a mist. And as this is solvent, we're almost running out. It's as you're coming across and as you're painting, you're going to want to have, like I said before, your pinky down here. Your two fingers, you can use one or two, and then your other finger over here supporting. And as you're coming across the panel, base, clear, whatever you're painting, I always do it. It's a lot different for Cerakoting, but it was really a different technique. But as you're coming across, you're wanting to start off the panel and end off the panel. And then as you're coming back, so you're not gonna go like this and then come back and do it again. Depending, you may do that eventually, but it depends on the panel. So as you come across like this, you're gonna go across, and it's solvent, so it's not really tacking down. And then you're gonna come back across, but you're doing about, I don't know, like 35 to like 50% overlap. And you're watching that wet edge. So you wanna watch as you're clearing it coming across. And as you can see, it's solvent, so it's not gonna be showing you what it's doing because it dries off really quick. But as you're coming across, and now we're out of solvent, you're gonna wanna watch that wet edge and make sure that it's wetting out. It's not too dry. The same thing with base. As you're going across with base, you're doing the same exact thing. You're coming across, and then as you're going back, you wanna make sure you're getting enough coverage. But you wanna make sure that it's not too heavy, because on metallics, like the Striker Green that I'm gonna be spraying on the Durango, if you spray it and it marbleizes, a lot of the new paints don't do it, but they will pull up on the metallics. As long as you don't get it where it goes and makes a run, when you do your drop coat, you're doing it on a lot lighter pressure. So this is clear, so it's not gonna matter, but you're doing your drop coat at like 18 PSI. Now that I went over all the Anest Iwata guns and which ones do what and how to kind of spray, a really rough tutorial, but it is a technique that you have to really perfect. If you're gonna get into painting and you're just going to go down to Harbor Freight and grab a paint gun, it's probably gonna work, but it's not gonna work for a very long time. Harbor Freight guns, they do work. Everybody says they work, they show them on YouTube, they do work, they paint. But if you compare them to a really good quality gun, if you've ever used one, it's definitely a night and day difference, especially longevity wise. And Anest Iwata guns, I've used them for a very long time, and they rarely wear down as long as you take care of them. Most of the time, the people that are ruining these guns, they'd never clean their gun ever. So, or something weird happens, they fall off the table, etc. I mean, we've all seen that happen. I need to get some stands for my guns. I've been working with Cerakote as well, and they have a really nice stand that I like. It doesn't work as well with a swivel fitting, I just thought about, but with just the chuck in the back of the gun, it is the best stand. So I also have an Anest Iwata gun for Cerakoting. I didn't show, it's a really small one, it's an LPH 80, but these are the workhorses of actually painting a car and painting it correctly. You see me paint the Durango Hellcat into Striker Green. In the next few episodes, the body will be done this week, and then we'll work on the bumper and the hatch and the flares, the side skirts. The last thing I'll do is the doors, and maybe the doors and the hatch may be the last thing I'm gonna do. Big shout out to Anest Iwata for hooking me up with these three guns right here. This has been my primary gun for a very long time. I love it. I've used this gun as well for a very long time. This is just a new version, and we now have a dedicated sealer gun. So I have my 2.0 primer gun, we have the 1.3 sealer gun, the 1.3 base gun, and the 1.3 clear gun. So really big shout out. I'll put links in the description for each one of these guns, and also a few of the supplies that I got, as well as probably some good swivels. If you guys are interested, it was a very big difference, especially when you're trying to spray up. And this is an SUV. If you're trying to spray up on an FD, look how much lower it is. So it's one of those things where all those inches really count in the moment, because that once you get down there and you have the whole top of the car cleared or based, and you can't get up and you can't turn the gun sideways, you're just like, oh man, I'm screwed. So plus you can't go back and clear it or base it, depending on what base you use. Some of the base that I use from Sherwin-Williams is really good. It says you have 24 hours to rebase, but I've never tried it and I'm kind of afraid to. But I did wait 4 hours one time because I had to run up to Colorado Springs to grab some more reducers. So I'm gonna end the video here. Big shout out again to Anest Iwata. I'll put the link in the description for the guns, everything that you're gonna need. Also, I'll put a link in the description for the dryer. This is a good idea. Where's it at? I haven't put it on my air compressor yet. So this is just a Harbor Freight one, but I'll put an actual good one. And then there's a Silica Dryer. So it gets rid of water, it gets rid of moisture, oil, everything. So I just wanted to really have this so I didn't have to worry about any contamination. I'm also going to use a new air hose when I paint the Durango, just because that one's always been on that, but just so I don't have to worry about anything. Plus I'm using another filter before the gun. So that is another tip. Always, the more protection you do at the beginning, the less work you're gonna have to do at the end, especially with dust and just debris and stuff like that, and contamination. So if you like these videos, make sure to click the subscribe button, throw a thumbs up, throw a comment below. As always, see you guys next time.